Hey YouTube, what is going on? Thanks for checking out the Straight SRT8 YouTube channel where we discuss all things SRT8 related. Now today I want to talk to you about buying a used vehicle. In particular, buying a used SRT. We're going to go through some typical checks. Should be a pretty quick video. We'll go through some checks to do before driving, some checks to do while you're driving the vehicle. I'll get into like what I call professional checks, and then checks you can do yourself, of course, with little to no tools whatsoever. So first one, you want to check if your car's been modified or not. So some mods are good, like an oil catch can. It's an awesome mod. It benefits your vehicle. It's a good thing to do. Other mods can be done incorrectly or can cause issues with the vehicle. So you want to check for certain mods. For example, if you're a car guy or car girl, you can hear a difference in cams. Check if there's been an upgrade to your cams or not. That means there's been a tune, and depending on the tuner, it could be a good tune or a bad tune, depending. If there are headers or exhausts, you can look at for a person who used to be a DIY person who maybe messed around with the vehicle. There used to be back in the day these tunes where you could put it in a little chip and you can modify your air temperature sensor in order to fake it to run in more lean or more rich to quote unquote get more power. Check for those kinds of things. Obviously, it's a very bad thing to do. You want to make sure nothing like that was done to your vehicle before you purchase it. So for checking for mods, it can tell you the history of the vehicle, the owners, what they did to the car, and then whether they were smart in what they were doing, or unless they tried doing these internet checks throughout to do like shady or stuff to get quote unquote horsepower, better gas mileage. Those are a few things, of course. Then we get into maintenance checks. So there are some easy checks to do. One being checking your check engine light. It could be that your check engine light is going to give you a lot of history on the vehicle. It'll tell you if, for example, you're throwing a code for an exhaust being too rich or too lean, or if you got a cloud sensor. So using those CAOs, they're there to help diagnose cars, and will that help you diagnose the previous person? How did they treat the vehicle? Did they treat it correctly? Is there a history of issues with the vehicle? Is there current issues right now going on that you have an active check engine light for? Fluids, that's a pretty easy check. You want to go ahead and make sure you got proper brake fluid. Make sure that you have steering fluid or coolant, engine oil, you name it, you can go ahead and do it. There's these basic checks to make sure your car's been maintained. Again, if there's a lack of coolant in the vehicle or a lack of engine fluid or whatever it may be, that points to bad maintenance in the vehicle, which means there could be issues with the car elsewhere that they're not telling you. Now, depending on whether you're buying this car from a dealer, if it's certified pre-used, if it is a person on Craigslist, there can be a range of things you should do to make sure your car is properly inspected. So some of these things may not apply to you, but nonetheless, I'm going to name them all. Tire wear patterns. This is a huge one. So when you look at your vehicle's tires, you can tell if the tread is even left to right of the tire, or if there's a bald spot or a dip in it where there's more tread versus another area. If your tires aren't straight, if they're tilted, you're going to have more wear on one side versus the other side. You can look at both your fronts and your rears. Is there more wear in the front in comparison to the rear where the tires rotated? So just looking at tires can tell you a whole lot about the vehicle and how it's been maintained. Brake pad. I like to check brake pads. I'll put my finger against the rotor and I'll try and feel for the amount of brake pad that is on the front and rear tires. Sometimes you can't get to the inner pad, but at least on the outers, you can make sure there's adequate brake life there. Again, it'll point to maintenance in the vehicle. And in some cases, in the case of this vehicle actually, my tires were worn and so were my brake pads. And so I negotiated money off the cost of the car. They replaced the brake pads for free and then gave me money, $1,000 credit towards brand new tires for the vehicle. So do those checks. Ask for service records. If you can't, go ahead and check out Carfax or an equivalent website. You want to know what was done to the vehicle. Was it maintained properly? For example, was your fluid changed at proper intervals, or do they never change that fluid? For me, as a rule of thumb, when I'm buying a used car, especially a more high-performance vehicle, I try to do all the fluid changes, assuming nothing was done. So I would do a transmission fluid change if the car has like 80,000 miles on it. If not, it's probably okay. Differentials, transfer cases, I'll do all of them because it's worth spending the $100 in material. If you do it yourself, that's free labor, of course. But it's worth spending that now versus assuming it's been done and have it not get done and then cause issues down the road. So pretty easy to do. Definitely worth it in my opinion for money well spent. Check recalls. There are recalls all the times on cars. Go ahead and make sure there's no active recalls on your vehicle before you purchase it. And if there are, make sure they get addressed before you purchase the vehicle. Then we get into what I call professional checks. So if you're buying a car like I did for my previous car, not this one, but the previous one out of state, I actually paid for a mechanic. I bought it in Maryland. I paid for a mechanic to go ahead and check it out for me. I said, hey, I'm buying this car. I want to make sure it's looking good. check for things you would typically check for, you know, in a Hyundai. And so this guy did, and local mechanic did a 100% inspection for me and checked for a variety of issues. There were none. My own diagnosis too. There were no issues for me either. So I ended up buying the vehicle. As a phenomenal purchase. But you can pay a mechanic to do a check for you. If you're not sure what you're looking for and you don't know how to check these certain things I'm talking about, then go ahead and pay a mechanic. Nothing wrong with that. And then, of course, I already mentioned the Carfax. So these are all things to do before you start driving the vehicle. Now I want to get into checks to do while you're driving the vehicle. So typical things are checking for heat, checking make sure your AC works, turn signals, brake lights, headlights. I mean, you name it, just basic checks. Your touch panel, those are expensive to replace. Make sure those work properly, that they're not sticking, they're not frozen. You don't have any kind of dull moments in the audio system. There's no lags, there's no pauses that are unintentional. You know, everything just works the way it's supposed to work. Listen for odd noises. So once you test the radio out, keep it off the remainder of the test drive and just listen. You know, does your car sound weird to you? Is it giving you any kind of heads up of issues? Is there a wheel bearing noise? Is there a brake noise? Is your engine making weird noise? You know, just listen for just typical things to understand if your vehicle is behaving properly or not. How's the car shift? So when you're driving either an automatic or a manual, there's different things to look for. In an automatic, accelerate normal. Listen to the transmission. Does it shift when it's supposed to? Do you see your RPMs having a hard time to drop? Do they rev too high? Do they rev too low? When your foot's off the gas and your engine's slowing you down, do you hear a weird clunking sound when the fork's engaged and you change gears? Just listen for all those things. If you have a manual, your clutch, obviously pretty important, your synchros. So when you're driving, go ahead, if you're driving a manual, put it in a higher gear and try and floor it. Listen for the clutch or watch the clutch slip. If you're watching your RPM skyrocket and your speed is going nowhere, then your clutch is slipping. There are other things to check for it too, but when you're driving a manual car, just make sure the manual transmission obviously works the way it's supposed to work. The clutch, is the clutch easy to engage or not? One common issue I had, there would be air bubbles in the clutch, so you get a lot of sponginess in the clutch when it fully disengaged, so just feel for those kinds of things. And then put it in the car, and obviously you want to have fun with the vehicle, right? When you're driving an SRT, you're there to have fun with it. So go ahead and floor it. Go ahead and launch it if you can. You want to make sure the car works the way it's supposed to work under stress and those powerful situations where you're fully engaging the engine. So go ahead and do that. If there's issues, you're going to find out pretty fast. Does the car pull in one direction or another? If you have a proper alignment, your car should drive straight. Now I say should because roads are pitched to have the water run off the road, so the center is always higher than the edges, so your car is going to naturally drift to the right. But if it naturally drifts to the left instead, doesn't make any sense. You're having an issue with alignment. Try and get it fixed beforehand. If it's been there for a very long time, your tires are going to show evidence of that issue, so go ahead and check those tires. This next one I think is pretty important, especially for SRTs or any all-wheel drive vehicle. So your differentials, you can test them pretty easily. When you're making a very tight turn, so make sure you have your steering wheel set all the way to the right and you're going clockwise, have it pegged to the right and just go slow. By doing so, your inside tire is going to go a lot slower than your outside tire because your inside tire has less distance to travel than your outside tire, which means you're fully engaged in differential. If there's an issue with the differential, you're going to hit it right down in there. So go ahead and make a tight right turn and go really slow, a couple miles an hour, and just listen. Do you hear any clunky noises in the front or in the rear? If you do, you got a differential problem. And then go ahead, turn all the way to the left and do the same thing. Go very slow, 2 or 3 miles an hour, and just listen. Do you hear a clunky noise in your differentials? If you do, get it fixed before you buy the car or don't buy the car. All right, so those are just general tips. Now I'll get into SRT specific tips. So we all know that carbon fiber on the vehicles is an issue. If you're buying the car from a dealer, you can go ahead and just check all the carbon fiber. If it's peeling, get it fixed. Tell them that you're not going to buy the car till the carbon fiber gets fixed. Another known issue is your caliper paint, the clear coat tends to peel off. Again, if you see it, tell them you want it to get fixed. I mean, before you buy the car, make sure it's in perfect condition. Go ahead and push these work onto the dealer and make sure your car is in perfect condition. These are minor issues. I don't see why they wouldn't fix them, but they may say in some instances say, no, we got a buyer that's, ready to buy it right now that doesn't want to have these issues fixed, and, then you got to play the game. Hemi tick. That's obviously an issue for SRTs in general. So listen for the hemi tick. Now, if you don't know what you're listening for, it can be a little bit hard to diagnose it because you're going to have your engine making normal noises. You're going to have your injectors pulsing making noises too. But you want to just try and listen for anything that's abnormal. Again, if you don't know, bring it to a mechanic. You know, they'll turn on the lesson for you. And it should be pretty cheap for a quick diagnosis that way. In our performance pages, there are a slew of gauges. You got oil temperature, oil pressure, coolant temperature. I mean, you name it. There's a slew of gauges in there. So while you're driving around, just pop it on the performance pages and check their performance. See if everything's where it's supposed to be. The needle tells you if it's supposed to be on the left side or the right side or in the middle. It tells you where it's supposed to be. So just go ahead and watch those while you're driving. Make sure your engine isn't overheating. Make sure your coolant is functioning properly. Make sure you don't have crazy high oil pressure or crazy low oil pressure indicating a leak. So just normal operation. And then the last one is have some fun. You know, go ahead and floor it and launch it. That's when you're going to stress the vehicle. If you have a problem with your transfer case not driving power properly, you can go ahead and test that. Put it in your auto mode and then go to track mode, right? You go from you can do a 60-40 split, you can do a 50-50 split, you can do a 70-30 split. So you're going to test that transfer case and make sure it's actually jumping power where it's supposed to. So go ahead and put in track mode, do a 70-30 split and launch it. Put a lot of power to that rear differential and make sure it's functioning properly. Make sure your transmission is good. I mean, go ahead and stress test the vehicle. You know, I can't stress that enough. Make sure it works the way it's supposed to before you buy it, because once you buy it, the problem's yours. Anyway, guys, those are my personal checks I go through when buying a vehicle, whether it's an SRT or not an SRT. I go through most of those checks, maybe not all of them, depending on where I'm buying it from. But I do want to make sure I'm getting, you know, a good bang for my buck. I don't want to buy a lemon car. I'm sure there are more checks. If there are, go ahead and put them below in the comments. I would then update my description. So make sure you guys, after you watch the video, read the description. It'll be updated with everyone else's comment checks they do for buying a used vehicle. But that's it for this video. Should be nice and short, and I hope you guys found it useful. I'll see you again soon.